Hello, Councilmember um, Alvarez and Vice Mayor Rogers. This is Kimberly. I'm the host that's filling in for Kaylee while she's on leave. And I just wanted to tell you, I hope there wasn't confusion over the start time. I know that invitation was for a little bit early, but that's really to allow people to log on early, only if they want to.
No, we're good. I'm sorry, I was kind of doing something else at the same time, but we're good. And I'll see you shortly.
Okay, thanks.
All right, Madam Clerk, let's go ahead and call ourselves to order. Do you want to take the roll call, please?
Sure, we have Mayor Rogers.
Here.
Vice Mayor Rogers.
Present.
And Councilmember Alvarez.
Also present.
All right, we have all council members present. Thank you. Let's do a little quick housekeeping for a reminder today. Council members, please remember to stay muted unless you are speaking. Staff will also remain muted unless they're giving their presentations. As members of the public join the meeting, you'll be participating as an attendee. Your microphone and camera will be muted, but only today's panelists will be viewed during the meeting in our webinar mode. If you're calling in from a telephone and choose to speak during public comment portions of today's agenda, for privacy concerns, the host will be renaming your viewable phone number as resident with the last 4 digits of the phone. Santa Rosa is committed to a safe and inclusive environment, free from disruption, and we will not tolerate any hate speech or actions, and we'll be monitoring the meeting to make sure that people are engaging with us appropriately. Now, Madam Clerk, could you please explain how public comments will be heard at today's meeting?
Just a moment, please.
Mm-hmm.
So when the time for public comment arrives, we will have a screen pulled up that will show 3 minutes. The timer will show on the screen, and each commenter will have 3 minutes to make their comments. We will have both a period for public comment for items that are not on the agenda, and each agenda item will also have its own time frame for public comment.
Great, thank you so much. And as we are working in our Zoom format, when we get to the appropriate time, if you want to hit the raise hand feature on Zoom or hit *9, we'll be able to call on you to go through it. With that, if other council members are ready, let's go ahead and go to item number 3. That is public comment for non-agenda items. That means for the items that we don't currently have on our agenda for today's work. If you'd like to discuss with the council members, we cannot get in a back and forth because nothing has been agendized, but we are happy to take notes down and give direction to staff. So we'll go ahead and start with Mike, followed by Kevin.
Mike, you should have a prompt, and as soon as you answer that prompt, you should be able to speak.
Mike, are you with us?
Okay, I was looking for the timer. Kim, is there a timer today?
Yeah, just a moment.
Mike, let's go ahead and have you go ahead and get started. And if you just exceed the 3 minutes, Councilmember Alvarez will yell.
There it is. It'll be much shorter than that. Thank you, Mayor and committee members. I so appreciate the fact that we're now meeting monthly. It is vital that we move. I know the speed of government is not as rapid as most of us would like, but it is great to know that we're picking up the pace here. I just want to say that the people that we work with at Friends of the Climate Action Plan and also the Climate Center are people that are new to the whole idea of the crisis and what has brought it to bear. And it would be good if we were able to see more farther down the road than just a month, as in a way to at least list, as the regular city council lists, upcoming meeting list, what might be on agendas and so forth. I know that's maybe not as doable as the actual city council, but anything in that direction would be well appreciated, so we can start to bring our volunteers up to speed on the issues that might be necessary. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mike. We'll go to Kevin. Kevin, you're able to unmute?
Yes, I just unmuted. The clock hasn't started yet. Anyway, I just have some general remarks to make. There's a quote that says that for great things to happen, you need two things: a plan and not quite enough time. And that's where we are.
Let me send you the link.
At yesterday's
I'm going to
climate
email you the link.
workshop, Supervisor Gorin pointed out how at one time Sonoma County was a true leader on climate issues. And it's time for us to take that leadership role again, I think. With Santa Rosa as the largest city in the county, we should be demonstrating what a city can do to really move the climate needle. With an ad hoc committee of just 2 people, and with the help of Jane Elias, the committee laid out a comprehensive agenda for the county to address climate that includes funding for a new climate division in the county and 3 full-time equivalents, and they allocated $10 million. They presented to the board and the public a list of 21 suggested climate actions that the county could take, all of them with timeframes, and 11 of them with projected costs involved to accomplish them. So I'm hoping that you guys, the Climate Action Subcommittee, can lay out a similar list of specific actions that Santa Rosa can take with timeframes and projected costs. Some ideas might be to definitely follow Petaluma's lead and put a prohibition on building new gas stations. I think you could establish a small fleet of school buses and outfit them with batteries to be able to roll into the areas where PSPSs are occurring and serve as cooling centers or a place for people to charge their phones or keep their medicines refrigerated. And then of course, my pet project would be to build a model municipal microgrid. And I'll close with this. We know we have to get people out of their cars. And for this to happen, we need to give people a vision, an idea of what it could be like to use their cars less. And we could do that by building at least one well-planned, complete street. Take a street, for example, just as an example, like Sonoma Avenue, make it free of vehicles except when needed for evacuations or ambulances and fire trucks and police and so on. And then have designated safe bike lanes, safe sidewalks, designated bus lanes with the safe and accessible transit stops and frequent safe crossings for pedestrians, and a landscaped median island where people could sit and visit. If this happened, I think people would bus or walk or bike ride to get downtown or to their medical appointments or to movie theaters, to restaurants, to Montgomery Village and Haworth Park, or just to get out and exercise. So I think we need to make these kind of bold moves quickly and be willing to make mistakes. I think that's the only way we're going to be able to live in the city we want to live in and at the same time help to save our planet. So thank you for listening.
All right, thank you, Kevin. Go ahead and go to Mark.
All righty. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All righty. Anyway, yeah, so good afternoon. And I guess Kevin and Mike took all the good stuff. So I just wanted to say, and I know they feel the same way, that we're very appreciative of the fact that you guys are taking time out of your busy schedules to meet monthly now. And, I think obviously, as you all do, that the situation warrants it, but that doesn't make the time constraints any less challenging. So very much appreciate the fact that the Climate Action Subcommittee is meeting monthly. And I just want to echo Kevin's ideas for complete streets. And we'll talk later about maybe a gas station ban. Thanks a bunch.
Thank you, Mark. Really appreciate you being here. Council members, I see no other hands. We'll go ahead and go on to item 4.1. Joey, I believe you are presenting.
I am Mayor Rogers and council members. My name is Joey Henowitz. I am an administrative analyst in the Department of Transportation and Public Works. And what I'll be talking about you with today is going to be a new state law that's coming out that was passed in 2016 by Governor Brown called SB 1383. Is focused on reducing short-lived climate pollutants in California, namely methane and CO2 emissions that occur from organic materials. So the overlying baseline of this is trying to get everybody, businesses, the public, the industry to be putting their food scraps and their organic material into the green bin to where it can then be composted and reduce some of those short-lived climate pollutants is really the overarching main goal of SB 1383, but I'll go into some of the details on the next slide. So SB 1383, this kind of sets the as to why did the state of California and the legislators at the state pass this law. It's probably the most significant waste reduction mandate to be adopted in California in the last 30 years. And when we talk about organic waste for the purposes of SB 1383 and really for the purposes of the general public to understand what we mean by organic waste, we're talking about green waste. So anything that you get out in your lawn, your shrubs, your bushes out when you're doing your gardening out front, as well as food waste as well. This also includes wood waste, natural paper fibers, such as paper and cardboard would also be included in what we categorize as organic waste. Organic waste actually comprises close to about 2/3 of our waste stream in California. And food waste alone is the largest waste stream that we find in landfills. According to CalRecycle's most recent waste characterization study, which was performed in 2014, food waste comprised about 18% of what we currently dispose in the landfill, which we could be diverting that into soil amendments as compost. Another requirement of SB 1383 is that SB 1383 also requires California to recover 20% of currently disposed edible food. And why we're currently looking into that metric, why we don't currently know how much food is waste stream is edible. What we do know is that 1 in 5 children do go hungry every night in California, and redirecting this perfectly edible food that is currently being disposed to feed those in need can help alleviate this issue. A couple of other interesting points to make here on this slide is kind of mentioned it already earlier, but landfilling organic waste leads to the anaerobic breakdown of that material, which creates methane. Methane is 72 times more potent than carbon dioxide over a 20-year horizon. And landfills are actually going to be the 3rd largest producer of methane in California, responsible for about 20% of the state's methane emissions. I don't really think it's necessarily an issue for us to understand here in Sonoma County, but I think we all know that climate change, may seem to some a distant problem. But there are more localized environmental impacts associated with the disposal of organic waste that have immediate negative impacts on our community now. Some of those impacts are that landfilling organic waste is a significant source of local air quality pollutants. These pollutants have an immediate negative impact on the air in our community and cause respiratory issues and hospitalizations. Diverting organic waste to be recycled and composted can significantly reduce these local air quality emissions and the associated negative impacts. We're already starting to see some of these impacts here locally, longer droughts, warming temperatures, drying of our public lands and forests have been contributing to our ever increasing wildfires here in California, specifically here in our local area. Cyclical droughts, bigger storms, and coastal erosion due to rising sea levels are all currently things that we're seeing currently happening due to climate change. So the baseline kind of point I'm trying to make here is that we shouldn't underestimate the cost of these climate change impacts. The state and communities like Santa Rosa are spending, a bunch of money, millions, billions of dollars to fight these wildfires, removing debris and rebuilding homes. That means that we're paying for climate change today. So while it might seem like a distant issue, the financial and public health impacts are here now, and we need to take action immediately to mitigate climate change. And ultimately, this is why SB 1383 was designed to reduce the global warming gases like methane, which are the most potent and are considered short-lived because they exist in the atmosphere a lot shorter than like CO2, which is kind of the reason why they call those short-lived. We can move on to the next slide, please. So now that we understand kind of the reasoning for behind the creation of SB 1383, let's kind of talk a little bit about the legislation itself. So the SB 1383 requirements, they do take effect January 1st of 2022. So that is relatively soon here. And they do have aggressive organic waste reduction targets, which are statewide targets. Keep in mind, these are not individual jurisdiction targets, but this is going to be 75% reduction of landfill organic waste by 2025 is the goal set for the whole entire state to achieve, the state of California. And jurisdictions are going to be required to implement specific actions rather than achieve unique targets. And SB 1383 actually builds on some current and past legislation that was passed in California, AB 341 and AB 1826. AB 341, focused on mandatory recycling, and AB 1826 focused on mandatory commercial organics recycling up to a certain level, which that level currently is set at about 2 yards of total trash per week. Any business would need to have organic recycling. Now under SB 1383, that's going to be mandatory for everybody. So it's essentially going to be mandatory for all businesses and residents to have all three waste streams. The baseline that it was set for SB 1383 and that 75% reduction is based on the 2014 waste characterization study that was performed by CalRecycle, which measured about 23 million tons of organic waste were being disposed. So as you can see there, it's quite a significant mandate. We have a 75% reduction with the goal. So we're currently at about a little over 20 million tons, and we're trying to get that reduced to just under 6 million tons. So it is a very aggressive goal, but we all understand that we're in an aggressive stance here to try to fight climate change before it's too late. As well as the food recovery goal is unique. Obviously, local governments aren't really involved in food recovery. So this is kind of one of the new aspects for us that we're still trying to figure out between the jurisdictions, City of Santa Rosa, and also our zero waste partners, specifically Zero Waste Sonoma, the local solid waste JPA here in Sonoma County. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a little bit in the past, a little bit in the future, but this kind of gives you a general timeline of kind of how this is proceeded at the state level and then how we plan to proceed moving forward. So I did mention back in the 2016, Governor Brown did sign SB 1383. It was adopted. There were a few years of informal rulemaking and kind of back and forth between the jurisdictions on language and how implementation was going to work out. There was a requirement for a 50% reduction in organic waste by January 1st, 2020. I will tell you, based on preliminary estimates, we're not quite there yet. So our next main goal is going to be trying to achieve that 75% by 2025. But some of the bigger dates to take a look at here, especially from a government lens, is that January 1st, the regulations take effect and state enforcement will begin. There is going to be kind of a 2-year overlay period, so to say, where it's going to be more focused on education than enforcement. But as of January 1st, 2024, local governments will then be required to take enforcement and have an enforcement plan, which is actually required earlier in 2022, but we will be physically being required to take enforcement on folks that may not be adhering to the requirements of SB 1383, which we hope by at that point it's nobody, but we still will be required to show that to CalRecycle that we are enforcing on the measures. Next slide. Okay, so it's definitely an expanse from the current scope of what we do currently in the kind of solid waste space here at the City of Santa Rosa and also on a county level. The responsibilities and scope of work for all of us are going to be increasing significantly, and I'll kind of detail some of those responsibilities. So one, we will be required to provide organics collection service to all residents and businesses. For the most part, we do provide that, I'd say, for a good 2/3, 75% of the current community. So we will just have to focus on that remaining sector that currently don't have those green bins, which we are, from my understanding, the city and also our waste hauler Ecology have been working diligently on. Under this, though, there will need to be some consideration for franchise agreement amendments. So you will be seeing me come back to City Council later in the summer, early in the fall, with some franchise agreement amendments, as well as some other education and outreach perspectives that I will be bringing forward to you here to kind of give you a little bit more of a cleaner update once we have an understanding of the implementation responsibilities and all of the costs that are involved, which are still being worked out between City of Santa Rosa, Ecology, and also Zero Waste Sonoma. As I mentioned, which is kind of a new space for government here, is that we would be responsible for having a food recovery program. And if there is not currently enough food recovery capacity in our jurisdiction, that we would be required to establish an edible food recovery program. So we're currently exploring this right now. There is currently a county RFP out to try to establish some of these figures and numbers from Zero Waste Sonoma to try to establish at least a baseline of our food recovery capacity currently and what kind of expanse we could potentially need in the future for that. So don't have a whole bunch of answers for you on that right now, but I can tell you that we are working on that, and I will probably have some clearer answers for you towards the end of the year. Thirdly, there is going to be the education and outreach commitment to the entire community. This would be on an annual basis, and it would also include requirements to translate to Spanish, which is nothing new for us here at the city. So just keeping that in mind, that we do have the education and outreach, which is going to be an extremely critical, important piece of this. There is also the requirement to procure recyclable and recovered organic products. These products would include compost, mulch, biogas, electricity, et cetera. Most commonly, though, will be the requirements to procure a certain amount of compost and mulch. This is going to be based on each jurisdiction's population numbers, based off of the most recent Department of Finance figures that we have for population. And I'll go into a little bit more detail on exactly, how much we're going to be expected to procure. But the thought process behind this from CalRecycle is that they want to create organic markets for these materials. And so they want to obviously have jurisdictions have some skin in the game. I will just kind of tell you right now, there are some preliminary discussions, and we're having one in a few weeks with CalRecycle. Myself, along with some of the other jurisdictional representatives of Sonoma County, have some concerns about the amount of procurement that they're expecting us to procure, which is about 8,200 tons of what would translate to compost a year at roughly a cost of anywhere from about $370,000 to $500,000 a year, which doesn't even include trucking costs. That would be just to purchase the material. That's also a concern off the top, but more of a concern is the fact that we don't want to get into a situation where we're competing with our local ag community and farming community for compost, where we'd be essentially driving up the cost of compost just because we have this mandate to have to procure it. So we're in early negotiations with CalRecycle to see if we can maybe get some relief on that, or if we can work with some of our farming community or ag community as direct service providers on the city's behalf. So still working out some of the details here, but wanted to give you guys, an update on just kind of the general update on SB 1383. Obviously, a big component of this is going to be the monitoring for compliance and conducting enforcement. So as I mentioned, the monitoring and education will begin in 2022, and then enforcement actions must start as of January 1st, 2024. Although we do need to provide and show to CalRecycle our implementation plan for our enforcement plan as of January 1st, 2022. So we should have that all squared away in plenty enough time. And then lastly, we would just need to adopt an enforceable ordinance prior to 2022. So that'll be one of the other housekeeping items that I plan to bring back in front of City Council, which will have to be, an official City Council meeting for you guys to sign off on that, where we are able to show that to CalRecycle that we do have those enforceable mechanisms and we do have those changes to our franchise agreement to include the SB 1383 requirements. And then you also see there is if we don't have enough edible food recovery capacity, we would be expected to expand that. So still currently looking into that as well. So there's quite a bit of different kind of topics and hit points here within SB 1383, all positive, all good. But as you can expect, local, jurisdictional staff is kind of scrambling to make this work at the moment. Next slide. Okay. So you might just think SB 1383, it really just affects, maybe transportation and public works departments or solid waste individuals or jurisdictions, but really it kind of involves the entirety of local government in their roles and responsibilities. Every department plays a role, and I'll kind of just touch on that real quick. So city councils and boards of supervisors like yourselves will need to pass local enforcement ordinances. City managers will need to be involved in capacity planning, procurement, and edible food recovery programs. Or your city administrator's office, or county administrator's office, excuse me. Finance and legal staff will obviously need to review and submit information on local enforcement ordinances, new collection fees, and ensuring that the programs are adequately resourced. Purchasing staff will be central to procuring recycled organic products with a certain recycled content percentage, which is going to be one of the requirements of SB 1383 as well, one of the specific requirements, including paper. Public park staff, they might be involved in assessing the need for local compost application of parks and city landscaped areas. Obviously, if we're going to be on the hook to purchase compost or mulch materials annually, we're going to need to figure out a space either to have free giveaways or to source this into our local parks and open spaces. And so they will be involved in that. More of a county kind of consideration, but it does affect us here locally, is the environmental health aspect. May be tasked with enforcement duties, including inspection, commercial food generators for compliance with edible food recovery requirements. Although it does seem that in the interim, this would be tasked with city staff and mainly Zero Waste Sonoma staff initially with those requirements. And then public transportation and fleet departments could be involved in procuring renewable gas for the city and or county-owned vehicles. So as you can see there, the big circle, it kind of involves everybody. And so everybody does have a piece of the pie within SB 1383. As I did mention, it is probably the most significant solid waste legislation to come out of the state of California since 1992. Next slide. So as I already alluded to a little earlier, we are in the middle of dealing with the implementation and understanding the requirements and setting forth our education and outreach perspectives. City staff is meeting with Zero Waste Sonoma monthly. Zero Waste Sonoma acting as the JPA and the Solid Waste Authority. They are taking the lead on a lot of this here. And so we want to thank our Zero Waste Sonoma partners. We are currently developing an MOU between Zero Waste Sonoma and the individual jurisdictions, which at this point would delegate certain responsibilities of SB 1383 to the agency, which when we say the agency, we mean Zero Waste Sonoma. Other responsibilities will be the part of city staff. And then alternately, the third main player, and this is going to be responsibility that would apply to our waste hauler, which is Recology. So rest assured that myself, city staff is currently working out all of these details with the appropriate agencies and haulers. And we will be coming back to you, obviously, as the year progresses with some more detailed information and updates to the city code, our franchise agreement, et cetera, as I've already detailed already. One of the benefits is there is going to be a waste characterization study that's going to be performed. Zero Waste Sonoma was able to put out an RFP for a waste characterization study that is going to be able to give us a better idea of what we are throwing away and what's going into the landfill, what's going into each bin, a little bit better here locally. Most recent waste characterization study was a handful of years ago, and we're also going off of the 2014 study, which was for the entirety of California. So we thought it was best to have a more localized waste characterization study that would give us some more, significant data that would be focused within Sonoma County. So that is currently underway and will be hopefully completed within the next few years, which is exciting. There has been some initial outreach to the community. Letters were sent to the commercial and multifamily generators that would be responsible for having to have all 3 bins in early February, and it will be also sent out, follow up in June and July, with the residential letter in June and July. Fortunately, here in Santa Rosa, when we switched over to Ecology, we did make it a requirement for all residential members to have that third bin. So it's that part's not so much a big lift to us. It's really going to be focusing on those remaining commercial and multifamily generators that don't currently have, organic waste service. It does become a little bit more difficult with the multifamily units, especially those that were built, 20, 30, 10 years ago, that didn't have the requirement in the zoning to build that third bin. So there is a potential for us to have some waivers based off of sizing constraints and space constraints, but those will be minimal, and those will be reviewed on an individualized basis by city staff. So the procurement target for compost, I did mention, was about 8,200 tons. Baseline kind of calculation I performed earlier, with a population of about 176,000 people, with the tonnage conversion, we're looking at about, on a per ton basis, about $378,000 a year. This is just to purchase the compost. If we buy that in a cubic yard conversion, which in my opinion wouldn't make a whole lot more sense, would be just above $472,000 a year. And like I said, keep in mind that this doesn't include the trucking costs, nor does it include, the storage of the compost. How are we going to deliver it? How are we going to, give it out to the community and or put it in our public parks? So it doesn't just affect, the solid waste staff at a jurisdiction. It kind of involves a lot of different departments as far as the handling and the, the production and putting of the compost into the the public space there. We can go to the next slide. So a little bit of a timeline here. As I did just mention, there was some letters that were sent out to the commercial multifamily generators in early 2021. SB 1383 does identify tier 1 and tier 2 generators. We have put together an initial list of those generators in Santa Rosa. And they do have some additional requirements on an annual basis that they need to be have some site inspections, which we are currently putting together those implementation details, as well as providing the Zero Waste Sonoma provided model franchise agreements to the jurisdiction for review that we can utilize to move forward with our individualized processes at our own individual city councils. Zero Waste Sonoma also provided some model enforcement ordinances, environmental purchasing policies, and edible food recovery agreements. In April, the Zero Waste Sonoma agency did finish their fiscal 21-22 budget with some fees adjusted for that to account for SB 1383, and those figures and numbers are still being developed and actualized by Zero Waste Sonoma. So we have started the MOU process, which is the memorandum of understanding between Zero Waste Sonoma and the jurisdictions as far as pretty much the implementation structure, who's going to handle what, how is it going to be handled, payment structures. So those are all, we are working hard on those. Those are all currently being developed. And like I said, we'll come back to you with some more finalized information in actual documents down the road. And then we'll need to start the JPA amendment process as well. Let's see here. So some of the other things that may need to be looked at that we're currently considering with legal counsels as far as the best way to move forward is a potential amendment to the city WDA waste delivery agreement. And definitely will have to be some adjustments made to our solid waste collection services agreement, which is our franchise agreement with Recology. Those amendments will need to be made as well prior to January 1st of 2022. By the end of the year, obviously the hope is that we've got all this wrapped up, and the intention is that we all have it wrapped up to complete the JPA amendment and any other collection services agreement amendments and with the SB 1383 language moving forward. So to have all that completed by the end of the year. Next slide. So some of the actions that need to be in place by jurisdictions, by the city of Santa Rosa by January 1st, 2022, is we would need to have that enforcement ordinance in place that I spoke of. We would need to provide organics collection service for all single family, multifamily, and commercial generators. This would include obviously a franchise agreement amendment, as I mentioned. We do need to make sure that we notify all the generators about SB 1383 and the requirements and the reason behind it as an education mechanism. There would need to be a procurement policy in place to first year to meet these procurement targets. And a lot of this is already contained within our Santa Rosa environmentally preferred purchasing policy. There may need to be some additions and amendments that'll be made to that, but the good news is we've kind of already started on that in the past, and so that one's not going to be an extremely heavy lift for us. And then also have a plan for funding future enforcement and increasing food recovery capacity. Next slide. So funding impacts. First and foremost, I think the biggest funding impact is going to be the expansion of the scope. So we do see here that we are expecting that, for certain elements of SB 1383, specifically the education and enforcement and also the container and contamination minimization checks, we are going to be required to do spot checks on businesses and single family homes bins to ensure that people are diverting correctly. And then if they're not, we would be, working to educate them and make sure that we get them the correct information so they can sort their materials properly. But there will be some rate increases that we do expect from Ecology to assist with this. There will be some rate increases, obviously, for the portion that Zero Waste Sonoma will be taking on behalf of Santa Rosa and all the other jurisdictions. So we do expect some rate increases in that realm. The regulations, the enforcement of the regulations I already kind of touched with on Ecology. Food recovery capacity expansion, that would definitely, we're expecting some additional funds to be needed for that. And then obviously I did mention the compost procurement at roughly, more or less $400,000 a year are all going to be funding impacts, along with just general staff time, meetings, reporting, ordinance administration. Those are all impacts and funding that we expect to happen from SB 1383. And it has been, essentially what this is it's an unfunded mandate from the state of California. So the expectation is cities and individualized jurisdictions will figure out how to fund these programs. And the expectation is you fund those either through franchise fee increases or you would fund those through rate increases. And I can tell you at this time that we would be expecting to fund the program through the solid waste rate increases throughout the city. Next slide. So that is kind of it for me. Definitely open for some questions. Initially, I know there's probably a lot of unanswered things and details that, the city council members and public are looking for. We're still working those out, but we wanted to initially have a discussion just to kind of put this on your radar. It is going to be a major solid waste legislation moving forward in the state of California. And so I just wanted to go ahead and make sure that we were able to discuss the matter and bring it to your attention. If you have any questions or concerns, now would be the time to let me know those.
All right, thank you so much, Joey. Council members, do we have any questions?
I have a question, Mayor, if I could.
Yep, go.
In regards to the food that goes to waste, what stops us from having grocery stores open up their pantries to these nonprofits, local nonprofits? Are there health and safety codes that would impede them from doing so?
The edible food recovery component is probably the least educated I am on this topic. I think ultimately that is the concern, is that either some of the grocers either don't want to give it away for those concerns of liability, as well as a lot of them already have current agreements that they take their edible food to certain pig farms or other farmers where they dispose of that food. And so that would be my initial answer to you on that, but I'd probably have to check in a little bit deeper and get back to you on that.
Oh, I would appreciate it if you did, just for my own educational benefit. Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
If it's for your own educational benefit, Councilman Alvarez, I know liability is a big thing when you're taking something out of a grocery store or even a restaurant and serving it. There's a big liability issue. But what I wanted to say, and it's before you even said this, Joey, is education, education, education. It wasn't until I started really participating in council and being on council and really starting to learn about our climate and how we can do things. And I'm talking about residential, I guess, at home. now I have my own little compost canister, right, with the compost bags specifically for that I can put into the green bin. But I had to learn and I had to be educated on that because that was not something living in a working class neighborhood that we really talked about, right? So I know that working class BIPOC community, and really I can't stress it enough, if we teach our children, they actually come home and teach the parents. So it's really an indirect way to educate our families, as if we teach our children in the school. So thank you very much for the presentation. I can't wait to see it develop and see where we go from here and how we can make this happen.
Great. Joey, I just had a quick question that it's related, it's tangentially related, but you mentioned that 20% of greenhouse gas emissions are coming from landfills in those short-term emissions. How is that accounted for in our categorization? So, for example, when we have the central landfill, does that fall into the county's assessment of their greenhouse gas emissions, or does it get divvied up by population and applied to cities for our reduction goals?
Is that a question like how it's factored in currently or moving forward?
Yeah, I guess both. But when we talk about our reduction goals and we talk about the metrics or our starting point, I'm trying to figure out where that sits.
So SB 1383 specifically would be based off of the 2014 study. So it would be based off of those amount of tons that are being diverted from the landfill. As far as how we categorize that in Sonoma County, I don't have an answer for you. I'd have to look into that and get back to you.
Yeah, if you could at some point, I'd just be curious, because when we talk about Santa Rosa has this much in terms of greenhouse gas emissions and our reduction goals, we've reduced 20%, 30%. If we're not counting things like our organic waste that's going into the waste stream, in the impact that has, it's something that I think we need to start accounting for, just so that we're more honest with our conversations. The other one is just a quick question. I've heard some chatter about some legislation in Sacramento to delay the implementation just because so many cities have been struggling through the pandemic. Are those bills still making their way through, or have they been weeded out at this point?
So the last I heard is that I think it's AB 619 or SB 619, which is the legislation you're talking about, is still in the early stages of trying to make its way through at the state level. Obviously, we do have some champions, and we've been working with, I've been on a regular call with the California League of Cities, and I can tell you that, there's like over 120 jurisdictional representatives there, and they're all very passionate about getting that passed, specifically in relation to giving jurisdictions a little bit more time because of, the COVID-19 situation. So I definitely think that is still an option, and it is moving forward, but I don't have a concrete answer as to, is it going to pass or is it not going to pass right now?
Yeah, I know it's oftentimes these things don't pass until they do. So I totally get that. Just make sure that you're keeping us in the loop about what you need from this subcommittee and from the council so that we can get on the agenda to be able to meet some of these obligations. And I know you will.
Of course. No, I think you guys will be probably seeing a lot of me between now and the end of the year, to be honest.
Yeah. All right, let's go ahead and go to public comment on this item. Madam Host. Okay, there we go. We'll start with Mark, and then we'll go on to Kevin.
Oh, righty. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. Yeah, I forgot to introduce myself last time. I'm Mark Mortensen, Santa Rosa, Friends of the Climate Action Plan. And I just wanted, first off, to thank Joey for the really comprehensive report. So much information there, but one of the things that stood out to me was that he pointed out how all departments need to look at how they can be part of, essentially it's a team effort. Every department can make a difference when it gets down to reducing waste. And hopefully this will be reported back, with the Climate Action Subcommittee's report to the City Council and put it forward to them as well. It was great to see the tonnage targets in the presentation. And I bulleted the same point that Mayor Rogers brought up about it would be terrific to have avoided emissions brought forth. There's likely to be a model that will take that tonnage and convert it to avoided emissions, which would be something that obviously we want to keep track of as we go for zero emissions or net zero by 2030. And then the other thing I wanted to bring up was that that FOCAP, the Friends of the Climate Action Plan, provided a list of climate actions back at the time when the city adopted its climate emergency resolution, and it had this list of climate actions, just suggestions, had a section on solid waste, and so I wanted to refer the committee back to that and point out 3 of them, just real briefly here. One of them, 6.5, was to make zero waste normal. That means, all events taking place on city property, whether it's street fairs or parades or county fairs, car races, be zero waste. And Recology is good working with that. And again, this was developed by FOCAP. Another one was reducing solid waste by building on existing programs to redirect that edible excess food from local businesses to homeless shelters. And yeah, we've got to be careful of the liabilities there. So it's got to be, good edible excess food. But we obviously we've got needs with the homeless shelters and the food banks. And so this would be an opportunity to add to that. Another suggested action from FOCAP was to close the loop on food and yard waste. This is 6.7 in the list. And that was essentially establish a citywide composting program, making it convenient for all residents to divert all food and yard waste from the waste stream, which is kind of what Recology is doing, and make that compost readily available to community members for carbon gardening. It's a sequestration opportunity. So yeah, make it available to community members. And again, thanks to Joey for all the hard work and to staff that supported him on that.
Thanks so much, Mark. Next, we've got Kevin. Kevin, you able to unmute?
Okay, the unmute button just showed up. Sorry for that delay. $400,000 mandated for compost procurement. That's really something. I imagine that just as Joey mentioned, there's probably inevitable that there's going to be rate increases for our residents. And I just think about this from a social justice or an equity perspective. I have no way of knowing, but it would seem logical to me that people of low income create less food waste than others. It just seems like that's a possibility. So if there is any way that these rate increases could be adjusted to be based on income categories, I know that seems impossible, but I don't know what the answer would be. But it just seems like those again that are least responsible, maybe for the problem, are getting hit, and they're the least able to afford the increases. So anyway, that's just my thought. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Kevin. Zinsi, and I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Zinsi, followed by Jenny.
Hi, this is Zinsi. I work with Zero Waste Sonoma, and Joey and I talk pretty frequently. And I just wanted to take this time to address some of your questions. So first of all, I wanted to mention, I know in Joey's presentation, there was a timeline that said that we were going to be sending out residential letters in June and July. That was originally the plan, but then we found out that actually all of the franchise haulers in Sonoma County already send out either biannual or quarterly newsletters. So instead of the agency Zero Waste Sonoma sending out our own letter to like 600,000 households, or I'm sorry, 200,000 households around the county, we were just gonna save paper, and we've actually partnered with the haulers to send out notices about 1383 or include that in the newsletters. The other thing is that we're actually hoping the JPA amendment doesn't have to happen, because that was initially the thought that we would have to amend the JPA because Zero Waste Sonoma is taking an enforcement responsibility. But our legal counsel says if we stop before issuing notices of violation and just leave that to the city, we can get away with not amending the JPA. Council member Alvarez, you had asked about food recovery limitations. A lot of restaurants and food facilities are not aware of the Good Samaritan law, which actually protects them from liability when they donate food in good faith. And so that's something that we have to incorporate into education when we do this outreach about 1383 and the requirements. The other limitations that we've often heard from restaurants and food facilities about donating food is it just takes extra time and staff effort to separate out food that could be donated. And it's just easier for them to put it in the green bin and have it composted. But of course, you know, if that food is edible, we'd like to see that be fed to people instead. And finally, Mayor Rogers, you had said you'd been asking about the bills to delay SB 1383. And I just wanted to mention that those bills, they do take time to pass in the state legislature. So, you know, we're not expecting that to happen for maybe like a year at least, maybe 2 years. And also, if those bills pass, it at most would delay implementation and or enforcement of 1383 for a year. So, you know, I think I would recommend, or I'm at least Zero Waste Sonoma is at this time going full speed ahead with 1383 implementation, and we shouldn't rely on those bills to pass. So if you have any questions, feel free, I'm here. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much. Jenny, followed by Alimas.
Thank you, Nance, for buying that.
Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead, Jenny.
Oh, okay, thank you, thank you. I just wanted to say thank you for a very interesting, comprehensive presentation. Overall, it sounds like a really good idea to try to get food to people who really need it as the top priority, and to reduce waste and to compost what can't be used for people as the first priority, or animals for the second priority. But Joey did mention at one point the production of biogas. And I wondered if you could say more about that, because my understanding is that biogas is basically producing methane, is highly flammable and very toxic and has a lot of toxic byproducts. And I wondered if you could address that issue. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jenny. We'll go ahead and ask that question when we finish public comment. We'll go to Alimas, followed by Karen.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, I'm Alima Silverman, live here in Santa Rosa, and am part of FOCAP. I didn't get the meeting in time to speak at the beginning, but I really appreciated this presentation, and think that Joey did a really good job. And I have a couple of questions. I compost all the time, but we put things in the green bin, both from the yard and from the house. But I'm very interested in getting compost back to use for mulch in the yard. That's one thing. The other thing, because this isn't part of your direct presentation, because it's not part of green bins, but my biggest trash these days is soft plastics. And I see, not being able to recycle soft plastics as really a big issue. So I don't know, Joey, if you know anything about this, or this is part of a different presentation, but it is part of getting to zero waste, because it's the biggest part of my trash. I have a little tiny bag, and then I have my green bin. I have all my recycling, but the soft plastics are really a problem. So that's the only thing I wanted to bring up. Otherwise, I appreciate the presentation. I appreciate Chris and Vice Mayor Rogers and Councilman Alvarez being a part of this committee. And I certainly want to keep following up with you all. So thank you.
Thank you, Alima. We'll go to Karen.
Hi.
Hi, Karen.
Hi. Thank you, Chris, or excuse me, Mayor Rogers and members of the committee. I have a question that I have called Recology about, and just wanted to bring it up and didn't hear it addressed in the presentation. I live in a condominium complex, don't do my own yard work, and the only green waste bin available to me is the large size one. And wondered if there's been any discussion about having smaller size of green waste bin. And that's my comment.
All right, thank you, Karen. So that's the last hand that I see, so I'll go ahead and bring it back for discussion. Now, Joey, there were a couple of questions that were in there, specifically about a smaller bin, question about the toxic byproducts from the methane. I'm wondering if you could answer some of these.
I will definitely do my best. So when it comes to the biogas question, I will be honest, I am in no means a chemistry or biogas expert, but from the purposes of SB 1383, the requirement to be able to use the biogas as an option towards your procurement credits would be an available option to jurisdictions. I don't think it applies to many jurisdictions, and where that comes from is essentially what they would be asking is that if there's any jurisdictions that have an anaerobic digester or an anaerobic digestion system where they do decompose either sewage or wastewater or strictly food waste. A lot of times that biogas can be captured and then utilized for electricity, which would give you your credits for SB 1383. As far as the chemical components of that, I really wouldn't be able to speak to it, but my understanding is that because it's being captured and then transferred into electricity, it would be less of a potent gas than it would be if you were just to landfill it.
Okay, thank you. Council, and I will also, there's just as a quick correction on one of the comments that was made about the legislation that it likely wouldn't pass until next year. I actually, when I asked the question, had intended because it'll either get scooped up into the budget as a trailer bill, or it will be required to be passed by the end of session at the end of August. And it's very unlikely to be a 2-year bill. So I just wanted to clarify that we will know this year whether or not legislation advances that could push back the deadline from next January. So I want to be very clear on that. Council members, are there any other comments or questions on this item?
No, sir.
Okay. All right, well, Joey, thank you so much. We'll have you back soon as we work our way through this. If you could just keep us posted on those efforts around legislation as well as what documents you need to bring to us in the event that nothing does change.
Great. And I just want to make one quick mention. I did put my email address in the chat box. So if there's any other questions from the community members that you can think of, I did miss her name, but the lady who was looking for a smaller green bin, just go ahead and send me an email and we'll work with you to achieve that.
Yeah, and that was Karen. So Karen, I think if you look in the chat, I think you'll find his email.
Great. Thank you.
Excellent. We'll go on to item 4.2, please.
Thank you, Mayor and Vice Mayor Rogers and Councilmember Alvarez. I'm going to go ahead and get my screen share set up here. Okay, so good afternoon. My name is Amy Nicholson. I'm a senior planner in the Planning and Economic Development Department. And the item before the subcommittee today is a discussion on the city's gas station regulations. This is just an outline of today's presentation. It is relatively brief, but I thought I would just orient everyone. The purpose of this discussion item is really to respond to comments that we've heard from members of the public who are supportive of the city considering a gas station prohibition. We are seeking feedback and direction from the subcommittee today. I'd like to outline the city's existing regulations for gas stations, talk a little bit about the existing gas stations that we have within the city, and provide some relevant local and state context. And then finally, I'll highlight an example of a local gas station prohibition, and then end the presentation with some city policy options to discuss. The city has a zoning code, which is the portion of the city code that regulates land use. It also regulates process and has a number of development and design standards for specific uses and also zoning districts. So gas stations is a use that is included within the zoning code, and it's defined as shown here on the slide, a pretty straightforward definition. And the zoning code has a table which indicates where gas stations are allowed within the city. So gas stations are allowed by a conditional use permit in many of the city's commercial and industrial zoning districts. They are not allowed within the core of the downtown or the business park industrial zoning district, any of the residential zoning districts, or our public institutional and open space zoning districts. I'd like to take just a moment to talk about what a conditional use permit is and what that process looks like. A conditional use permit is a discretionary planning entitlement. And what that means is that it's not just a matter of checking for compliance with standards, but there are also findings that a review authority has to be able to make in order to grant approval of a conditional use permit. So this graphic on the screen shows the steps of a typical conditional use permit. It starts when the application is submitted to the department, that's then referred to various city staff members and also outside agencies as appropriate. And a public notice is also sent to both property owners and tenants within 600 feet of a project site. The bigger portion of the review and time is really spent on the blue and yellow circles. This is when the application is reviewed for not only code compliance, but also compatibility, and any issues may be addressed during this phase. Assuming all issues can be addressed, the project would move forward with conditions of approval being drafted and environmental review being completed. So this is whatever the California Environmental Quality Act would mandate for the specific project on the specific site. So once all of that work is done, then a public hearing is scheduled. And for a conditional use permit, this is with the city's planning commission. This is a 7-member review authority appointed by the City Council. And the meetings are public meetings. The Planning Commission would then consider the project proposal, and they would either approve or deny the conditional use permit. This decision would then be appealable to the City Council. So this is a typical conditional use permit process. It might be about 6 to 9 months. It can certainly be much longer than that, depending on project issues and the environmental review that's required. The zoning code also has a number of standards for gas station uses. These include a specific site area and dimension. Gas stations also can't adjoin any of our residential zoning districts or single family or duplex uses. The zoning code does include concentration requirements. So no gas station can be within 500 feet of another gas station unless the site is within 50 feet of either Highway 101 or Highway 12 intersections, or if the gas station is incorporated into what's called a planned development project. Planned developments are relatively rare. We have a lot of existing ones, but we don't see a lot of new planned developments. But these are sort of projects that have custom zoning. And then finally, there are regulations regarding or requiring physical removal of a gas station if that gas station becomes non-conforming and is abandoned for a period of 6 months or 365 days in a 2-year period. So an example might be a gas station was legally constructed and then a new residential development comes right next door to it. So that would create a non-conforming gas station by this code. And if that gas station were abandoned for either of those periods of time, physical removal would be required. This slide shows some gas stations in the city of Santa Rosa. I included it just to really show the concentration of gas stations along 101 and Highway 12. I will say that getting an accurate inventory of all the gas stations in the city was a bit of a challenge. We do know there are at least 21 gas stations, but just with the mapping resources that we had available, I don't feel 100% confident that 21 is the exact number, but I know there are at least 21. I also want to note that we have 2 conditional use permit applications for gas stations under review currently. I think it's important to acknowledge the state and local context that can help inform this discussion. One is an executive order signed by Governor Newsom recently, which bans gas-powered cars by the year 2035. And then an executive order signed by Governor Brown in 2018 with a goal to reach carbon neutrality by 2045. We also have our existing climate action plan for the city, which was adopted in 2012. This plan doesn't specifically talk about gas stations as a use, but it does focus on renewable energy generation and use, and also reducing transportation emissions. As we heard at last subcommittee presentation from RCPA, transportation emissions are about 60% of the county's GHG emissions in total. And finally, the city has a local goal to reach carbon neutrality by the year 2030. This is memorialized in the Climate Emergency Resolution, which was adopted by the council in early 2020, and this was following support by the Climate Action Subcommittee. I wanted to highlight a local example of a change to gas station regulations, and this is the city of Petaluma. This has been pretty widely circulated in our local news, but Petaluma did adopt an ordinance which prohibits new gas stations, and this ordinance went into effect in March of this year. This is the first known jurisdiction in the country that has prohibited the construction of new gas stations. And I'm certainly not an expert on Petaluma's ordinance, but some kind of high-level points are that It does allow for continued operation of existing gas stations, but it does limit how those gas stations can exist. So they're not able to expand. For example, they wouldn't be able to add a new fuel pump, but if they needed to do some minor maintenance work, it appears that would be allowed. The ordinance also includes some language regarding installing equipment which would serve zero emission vehicles as well. So bringing this back to Santa Rosa, we have on the slide some very basic options, and staff at this time is seeking comments from the subcommittee on any of these options. And if you have more specific ideas, we would certainly appreciate hearing those so that we can return as necessary and move forward. And we also look forward to hearing from members of the public. So one option presented here would be to prohibit new gas stations within the city limits. Another, to modify the existing regulations. And I'm happy to speak more about what that could look like. And then finally would just be no change to the existing regulations. That concludes my presentation, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Amy. I'll go ahead and I'll start with the Vice Mayor, since I know you have a time constraint. Do you have any questions or comments?
I was just going to ask, what is the modifying existing regulations actually look like? If you wanted to give us a brief summary of what that would look like, and then I can continue with my comment if that's okay.
Sure, I would be happy to. I just have some examples that came to mind as I was putting together the presentation. So it might, there might be a change to the zoning district where gas stations are allowed, changes to concentration requirements. Those are the two that are popping into my mind right now, but I think that it can really be open, but it's kind of a middle option between a prohibition on new and not changing the regulations that we have.
Okay.
And we can certainly come back with some additional information and options to share with the subcommittee.
Awesome. So, Mayor, I am definitely thinking prohibiting new gas stations within city limits is something that we need to look at, the council needs to look at. But I would also like to keep in mind that the two applications that are already in, be mindful that depending on where they're at in the process, these people have spent a lot of time, money, and effort in order to even get those applications in. And even Amy acknowledged that within the two out of the first three little bubbles, I don't know, I'm a visual person, that those are the ones that take the most time. So I'm not quite sure where those applications are, but I think we probably should be mindful about where, that they're already in, they've already started the process. And if this is something that we're going to do, we should be moving forward from here on.
And Amy, I'll ask that to you as a question. The two applications that are currently in, where are those sites located and where are they in the process? So I guess both a physical and a metaphorical, where are they?
Let me reach out to the current planning team to find out more about the process, and I can do that right now and get back to you. Okay,
that's great. Councilmember Alvarez, any questions?
No, they've been asked. My concerns were the two outstanding applicants. I am aware of one of the applicants as I've been approached by them, and to the point that Vice Mayor Natalie Rogers made, the contribution that those applicants are making to the Joe Rodota Trail, which is actually both of our districts, are actually impressionable. I'm impressed with them. So I would hate to lose those applicants when they're going to make a positive contribution to what is the Joe Rodota Trail, as well as the electronic charging stations. But in regards to prohibiting new gas stations within the city limits, I am definitely for that. And I would like to see what my fellow council members have to say to and weigh in on the subject as well.
Okay, I have a couple of questions too, Amy. First, and I'm going to go very aspirational and broad first, and then bring it back down a little bit. But it strikes me that the council has already banned gas infrastructure in new construction that's under 3 stories. We're discussing banning new gas infrastructure, which is essentially what this ban would be, is on new gas infrastructure. Is there any additional gas infrastructure that gets laid in our community that we would want to look at? And perhaps instead of doing this piecemeal housing and then cars and then whatever the other one is, perhaps what we should be looking at is just a policy of no new gas infrastructure. And I don't know if you're prepared to be able to answer sort of where other or additional gas infrastructure comes in, but it does strike me as we're having this conversation is perhaps that we could do something a little bit bigger, more aspirational.
I don't have the confidence that I can answer that question, but I can certainly talk to some of my colleagues and get back to you.
Yeah, I'd be, if you would, that'd be great. We'll, potentially it sounds like we'll hear public comment and then get direction from the subcommittee, but it's sounding like we're going in the direction of at least having another conversation about a potential ordinance. And so perhaps that's some information that could be presented at that time as well, just in case we do want to broaden it. And then my second question, it was sort of an assumption, is the proposal or is what Petaluma did and what we're potentially looking at, that existing gas stations that close would then be able to reopen with a different gas station? Is it about the site location, or is the proposal once a gas station closes, no other gas stations allowed to open there?
For the city of Petaluma?
Yeah, for Petaluma, and then potentially what our options are here.
I would have to look back at the Petaluma ordinance. I'm not sure about that specific question. I think for Santa Rosa, we can explore either. And so what we can do is come back with something more substantial for the subcommittee to respond to and present some more concrete examples. And so we can look at both of those options. And just before I forget, to Vice Mayor Rogers' comment about projects that are currently being processed, we can also add some language for pipeline projects. So if they've already submitted, we can address how those would continue with the process.
Okay.
Mayor, I have a question. Are you asking like if there's an existing gas station, let's say I have a gas station, I'm going to go out of business. Can you come and like rename it and start up your business on my existing site? Is that what you were asking?
No, I'd wait until you went out of business and then I would take over. But that's the general idea is you've got a gas station, you go out of business or you close down. And then I, as somebody, if I wanted to build a gas station in Santa Rosa, could go and look at where the existing infrastructure was already in place and take over that infrastructure, as opposed to purchasing a new site that has to put in the gas infrastructure. I'm looking at it from an infrastructure perspective more so than each individual business, if that makes sense.
Because it also goes into zoning as well, doesn't it? The permissible uses.
Yeah. And I'll say, and then we'll go to public comment. I'm actually, I appreciate that folks have been working on 2 applications. I actually feel no obligation for us to approve something just because somebody has submitted an application, and I want to look at what's in the best interest of the city on all of these as we move forward. And perhaps that is a sort of a middle ground, is if we had that type of a requirement in our process, that those individuals who are interested in having a gas station in Santa Rosa wouldn't be completely put out. They just have to find a location, and there are many that have the existing gas infrastructure already and have closed down for whatever reason, as opposed to doing the outlay for new infrastructure. But we can definitely talk about that in the construction of how we do this as well. So with that, I will go to public comment. Seeing some hands pop up. We'll go ahead and start with Mark, followed by Alima.
Great, thanks again, Mark Mortensen with FOCAP. And first off, thanks a lot to Amy for the terrific presentation, very clear. First off, just wanted to say that, you know, you could see from the map that there are plenty of gas stations in the Santa Rosa area, and we really don't need any more. So obviously, I would strongly encourage the Climate Action Subcommittee to select option 1. Right now, that would be the no new gas stations at all. Right now, Sonoma County is the only multi-jurisdictional county in the country with climate emergency resolutions in all jurisdictions. And I think we can do the same thing on gas. You know, Petaluma got things started, and Santa Rosa could be the next one in line. I guess I wanted to say that I would hope, I'm missing one little item here, that I would hope that the council would really just go ahead and direct staff to finish up on the detail work as far as changing ownership and you know, what would happen with current infrastructure, and you know, get an ordinance ready and bring that directly to the council. I guess that would be my hope, is that we can keep things moving on this. It's time we take action, obviously, and we have an opportunity here. So let's bring it to the full council and with the details. And I guess that's all I have. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Mark. We'll go to Alima, followed by Woody.
Hi, this is Alima, also FOCAP. I strongly support banning new gas stations. As an architect, and I've worked on projects before with gas stations, it's my understanding that every time a gas station changes owners, they have to make changes to the infrastructure. And I'm not certain what those changes are, but I do know that the existing gas stations, if they just change in ownership, have to change things. Perhaps there'll be cleaner ways of putting in infrastructure in the future. But in any case, I support banning any new gas stations. I think we have plenty. I think many of us will be going to electric cars as quickly as we can. And we need more charging stations and less gas stations. So that's my comment. And I support all of you in taking that to the whole city council. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Alima. We'll go to Woody, followed by Tom and Chris.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Woody.
Great, thanks very much for having me, Mayor and council members. Woody Hastings with the Coalition Opposing New Gas Stations. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. The Coalition did send in some written comments a while back, but I think we might have sent them too early and perhaps not to the correct email address. So we did have some written comments, but did not see them in the file, but hopefully they can be in the record at some point. Obviously, we certainly support a prohibition of new gas stations in the city of Santa Rosa. It gets to the question of what does a climate emergency resolution mean? If it doesn't mean that you're going to stop digging the climate crisis hole, then it doesn't have much meaning. And expanding gasoline infrastructure or natural gas infrastructure is just the wrong direction to be heading in the 2020s. So, you know, we urge you to keep it fairly simple and try to cleave just to a simple prohibition against new gas stations. If you do want to address things like expansions of, you know, more fueling pumps at an existing gas station, I think I would agree that you might want to include that, but really not anything about existing gas stations. This is about the construction of new gas stations. And, you know, there's a lot of climate actions that the city is being asked to do and lots of ideas and proposals out there. This is one where the city would actually, if you adopt an ordinance, you'd be doing less work because it takes, you know, the city has an active role in permitting, accepting applications and permitting new gas stations. And we believe there's an abundance of them. We don't need any more. And the likelihood is that as gas stations close, nobody's going to be coming in to replace a gas station with another gas stations. They're on their way out. It's a 20th century model. It's a 20th century fueling infrastructure system. And so we should expect them to be phasing out over the next 10 to 20 years, not being replaced with new facilities. So, you know, that's what I wanted to say. So thanks again for the opportunity to speak.
All right, thanks, Woody. Next, we'll go to Tom and Chris.
All right, there we go. Hi, can you guys hear us here?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, sorry about the pause. We're old, we can't figure out technology. Anyway, Mayor Chris Rogers, Council Member Natalie Rogers, Council Member Eddie Alvarez, thank you so much for your time today to listen to our community. You guys are in a real special time and place in your position and as our council members to make a huge difference in California, leading the world in coming to terms with climate change. My name is Chris Thompson, as some of you might know, and I'm from the Oakmont Democrats and the Oakmont Progressives. I support efforts to ban all new gas stations in Santa Rosa. We need to keep our eye on the ball, which is to save our planet. The goal is to phase out gas stations in the service of helping this suffering world of ours not to be distracted by zoning and other exceptions. I thank you so much for your time. And I'll add just a word on that. I'm Tom Amato, also active with Oakmont Democrats and Oakmont Progressives. Two things just stand out in my mind. If in 2035, we're not going to allow sale of gas-powered vehicles, we really need to be phasing out gas infrastructure. And this is one way to do it and a way to be a leader nationally. The second thing I'll just comment on is I look out my window, as some of you know, where I live here at Oakmont, I see a burnt out hill. And a day or so ago, we had our red flag warning, our first of the year. The urgency of climate change is on us and it's going to get worse. And we need to do everything we can to move away from fossil fuels. So again, thank you for your time and leadership. And I hope you ban gas stations, new gas stations.
All right, thank you so much, Tom and Chris. Let's go to Jenny.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Jenny Blaker. I'm also co-coordinator of the coalition opposing new gas stations, along with Woody. And I would urge you, of course, to choose option number 1, prohibit any new gas stations in the city of Santa Rosa, apart from the ones that are already into the process. I think the main point is to not prolong dependence on fossil fuels into the future. So as gas stations close, then those sites need to be cleaned up. One thing that hasn't been mentioned so far is how polluting and toxic these sites are. There are a lot of leaking underground storage tank sites all over the city and all over the county. And every time a gas station is abandoned or something, there's always cleanup to do. So I would say if someone leaves a gas station, then that's the time to come in and clean it up and turn it into a site for something completely different. So yeah, please go for option number 1. And again, that would save the city time and money dealing with applications and then dealing with opposition to the applications. Congas has already, I think we've seen 3 gas station applications go away as a result of a lot of public opposition. And this is only going to continue as time goes on. So if you were to adopt option 1 now, it would save a lot of money and hassle in the future. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for bringing this to the agenda today.
All right, thank you so much, Jenny. So that's the last hand that I see, so I'll go ahead and bring it back to council members. I will note that some council members have had a chance to weigh in a little bit, but I'll start with you, Councilmember Alvarez. Let's give direction to Amy about what we would like to see next.
Thank you, Mayor. For myself, ultimately, it is about removal of gasoline stations within the city of Santa Rosa. And from my own personal experience, the jewelry store that my family owns used to be the Bad Benny's gasoline station. So I do believe that we can take a property and reinvent it into something that can give use for the community and could be very successful. So I don't see as a defunct gasoline station as something that can be a blight. I definitely see the potential in it. And when we speak of moving into the future and hearing that the car manufacturers are moving away from gas, it only makes logical sense that we do the same.
All right, Vice Mayor?
I would like to see it go to council
Okay.
with my additional comments earlier.
Yeah. All right, and then my comments, Amy, I agree. Our future is not our greenhouse gas emissions. It's not gas of any type. And so I am interested in seeing it. It will have to come back to this committee as an actual policy for approval, that then we can send the policy on to council to do. But I'd like to see us craft it. There are some lingering questions that I have out there just in terms of options and how you bring it to us. One of them is that question about what additional gas infrastructure we have in our community. It might be that we go the simple route and just say no new gas stations, which is my preference. It might be that we go bigger and we say that there's other things that we're not thinking about that have gas infrastructure and requiring no new gas infrastructure in our community. So I'd be interested in seeing that for sure. I also would like to see in the policy if somebody is utilizing an existing site of a gas station, that when they come in, or if they expand the gas station to have more pumps, that there's at least a 1-to-1 trade-off between charging infrastructure for vehicles versus the new gas pumps. So for example, you have an existing station that wants to put in 2 new pumps. That can be reviewed along with they have to have at least 2 charging infrastructure stations. Any old gas station, if Natalie's gas station goes out of business and I want to take it over, I have to put in the electric charge stations at that site to offset the gas pumps as well. Just some ideas for us to consider when this policy comes back to us next time. I also think it'd be really helpful for us to have the data point of how far somebody in our community currently has to drive to get gas. I think what I saw was that you have 5 miles was the max in our community from one to another. And it'd just be helpful for us to understand, particularly for some of our communities that are not going to be able to switch to electric vehicles as quickly as others, to see what the actual social impact is to them as well. And I see a comment has popped up. My preference is no additional gas pumps being added in our ordinance that we consider, but I do want to consider different possibilities within it with the charge stations when we do consider it at our meeting.
And Mayor,
yep.
I know we're not going back and forth, but just wanted to say that even looking at the map as far as concentration in gas stations, it looks to me that the concentration of gas stations is in lower income areas and not up on the hill somewhere. So I just wanted to put that out there. They are in our neighborhood, Eddie, right? I mean, I've seen a bunch of them.
I think
they are. They are. And if you look at the corner of Sebastopol Road and Stony Point, actually Highway Fulton Road and Sebastopol Road, you'll notice that there is a big gap there isn't concentration there on that corner for us, which kind of begs the question of how far do people from that neighborhood have to travel to get to gasoline, opposed to other areas as well. Interesting.
Okay. Amy, any additional questions for us?
I do not think so. That's helpful. So what I'm hearing is that the subcommittee is interested in a prohibition of new gas stations citywide. We will look into if there's additional gas infrastructure within the community and provide that information to the subcommittee next time we meet to discuss this item. We'll also include information on potential EV charging stations if additional fuel pumps were to be added just as an option. I'll look into distance to drive to a gas station. And then I will, what I'm hearing is that we can kind of flesh these things out. And so there's more concrete things to respond to. And then following that subcommittee meeting, we could start on the drafting of an ordinance, which would then go to the entire council. Is that what you're envisioning there?
I think, yes, all of that is great. What I envisioned was the direction that you're getting from council members right now with the subcommittee is to draft the ordinance so that then we can see the draft ordinance in the subcommittee and sign off on it and then send it to council for approval.
Okay. So when this item comes back, it would be in the form of a draft ordinance and potentially some options that address those items that I listed off a moment ago.
Yeah. Okay. If other council members are comfortable with that, I think that's the best way for us to project manage moving a policy forward is let's write it, let's discuss it, and then send it to the council if we deem that it's appropriate.
And Mayor, to reiterate your comment about the infrastructure and how we can be innovative towards the future, I think that's a great comment and a great direction to be moving. I just really want to highlight that part.
Keeps it in the forefront for me all the time, Eddie. All right, I think we've got direction on this one then. And Amy, I'll work with you to see when we can bring this back to the subcommittee. I know you have other things on your plate as well, but I recognize the urgency of what we're trying to accomplish.
Great, thank you.
With that, we'll move on to subcommittee reports. Do we have any reports from our subcommittee members? Natalie or Eddie? All right, seeing none, we'll go on to staff reports, department reports. Do we have any reports from our staff?
I have a few quick things to run through. First, Kimberly Hopwood, she's acting as the subcommittee's recording secretary while Kaylee is out on leave. So just wanted to thank Kimberly for hosting in today's meeting. Next, I wanted to announce that we are hosting 10 community vision workshops for our general plan update. So this information has been posted in a number of places, but thought I would take this opportunity to state that those are occurring this week and next week, and they will be held by Zoom. So if anyone is interested in attending one of these visioning workshops, you can go to santarosaforward.com/vision workshop. And there will be one workshop, at least one workshop held for each of the council districts. And there will be a council member attending these workshops as well. So we really hope to get as many people to participate as possible. Also, I appreciate both Mike and Kevin's comments that were made earlier today on upcoming meetings and what staff is working on. So we are working on finalizing our upcoming meeting list. to both better inform the subcommittee and also the public on various issues that staff is working on, and to also show how those efforts are aligning with the RCPA climate mobilization strategy. So we'll have more on that soon. And then finally, planning staff are reviewing a draft report from a climate adaptation workshop that we held in January with many members of the public. So we look forward to sharing that final report with the subcommittee and the public soon. And that is it from me.
All right, thank you so much, Amy. And I appreciate you bringing up the visioning workshops for the general plan. Our first one is for District 5. It's tomorrow night. And then there's a Spanish version of it that'll be on Saturday as well. So hopefully folks will join us. And for the full list, can see each district as well. I think you said there were 10. I think that's right. And so there's plenty of opportunities for people to participate, and it's really impactful, as you know, on our climate. Any other statements or comments? All right, then thanks.
No, sir. Just thank you very much for the presentation, Amy. I do appreciate it.
All right, thank you, everybody. Then we will go ahead and adjourn. See you all soon.
Thank you.